Hello, this is Rich Larson from Watermark Learning, and welcome to the March 2019 edition of the IIBA Certification Chat. We hold these chat sessions the first Friday of every month, with a couple exceptions for holidays or whatever, and invite you to attend as many as you want as you are learning about, applying for, studying for, and final stages of passing. And I've had people who have come on this for questions about recertification. So anything IIBA certification related. So I see a couple of people. Kartik, how are you doing? You think you've attended before? So I've had several people attend. Nadeem, hello. To get started, please look at the GoToWebinar question panel and send me in your name. Hi, Nadeem, how are you doing? Okay, send in your name and where you're from, just to kind of get used to the question panel, because that's how questions get submitted into us for this session. And then I'll read the question out loud, and if I have any follow-up questions or comments, I'll ask. So if you could just look at that now, send it on in, kind of get used to it, and then when you're ready, just shoot in your questions for me. I see a couple of them coming in. Hello, Jeremy, Tom from Chicago, John from Minneapolis. Good, you're getting used to the panel, you're all finding it. And queue the questions up, because I'll just take them in order and answer them as they come in. Hi, Nadeem, you're from Florida, working at Ultimate Software. That's excellent. Razvan from Raleigh, North Carolina, welcome. Somebody checked in earlier from Romania. So that's cool. I love getting people from around the world on these sessions. Hello, Alka. Good afternoon for you. Another Romanian, Daniela. Hello, welcome. Patricia, you're part of a local study group. Excellent. Alka from Toronto. So excellent for checking in. So let me read the first question from Kartik, who asks, how do you dissect the case study and scenario-based questions? We have those in our online study exam, and they're designed to prepare you for the real questions that you're going to get on the IIBA exams. Now, let's take a scenario first. Those are generally about a paragraph in size. And by the way, if you take the CCBA exam, you will get some of those questions too, as well as, I believe, the IIBA-AAC, the newest certification from IIBA. Anyway, scenarios are a situation, as opposed to a knowledge-based question or recall question, as they're sometimes called, that says, you know, what is the definition of a business analyst? Just a silly example. But a scenario might say, you know, John is a BA working for a healthcare company and is facing an issue with stakeholders, and a couple other sentences like that. And I might ask you, what's the first thing John should do? So that is a scenario. So I would just read through the scenario carefully, look for keywords like stakeholders, or maybe they're not cooperating, or maybe there's disagreement. To look for the specific keywords, and beware of distractors, so that they're designed to kind of get you maybe tempted to think the wrong way. And the reason why distractors are important in any kind of certification exam is that they test your real knowledge and not allow you to guess at the right answer. So that's scenarios. Case studies are more complex. IIBA says they are 1 to 1.5 pages, and we take that to mean somewhere between 400 to 700 words that may have some diagrams in them. And some of our examples have diagrams to help you dissect a real life kind of problem. They're meant to be a competency-based type of thing. And so their intent is to get at your ability to apply your business analysis knowledge in a real world setting. But they're long and complex, and usually you only have 3 to say 5 questions for them. So what we suggest is kind of glance through, don't read it carefully the first time, and then go to the questions and see what the questions are asking you to apply. So then go back and read the case study for that question to try to understand the intent, because again, much of the case study might be extraneous information like you might find on the job, but to solve a specific problem, you have to be able to zero in on the particular thing at hand. So that's just to review that then. Scan the case study, read each question, maybe take a question at a time, then go back to the case study, looking for the part of the case study where that question applies to, and then answer that question. Rather than take 10 minutes to read carefully the case study and then answer the questions. You don't have that much time on the exams. So you don't want to spend excess time reading through those questions if you don't have to. So that's a quick overview, Kartik and everybody else. Patricia writes, I've been part of a local study group that does count for only continuing education. And you're asking, can it also count for hours to qualifying for certification? Here's the rules for study groups. If the study group has a designated moderator, think of that like an instructor who would facilitate, and somebody then you could ask questions of, number one. Number two, that you have some sort of demonstrated work that you do. So part of IIBA's intent for this professional development requirement is that you're actually producing some sort of work or practice or workshops or something as part of your education. So if the study group has any kind of exercises, or the easiest way is to do practice questions, because that's the most beneficial anyway for getting successfully certified. So we advise people is to do practice questions during your study group. So if those are the two main things, having that instructor interaction and producing work, then your study group can count. And other study groups have successfully gotten that to happen. So okay, let's see. Hello from Turkey, Basak, welcome. And from California, Yasser from Vancouver. I love seeing people from all over the world. The slides are located in the handout section. Does anybody see the handout section, or am I just the only one from our own end? So shoot me in, yes, you see it. Okay, so look for the handout section. Now, Patricia does a follow-up. Yes, we did watermark questions. So if you did our watermark exam questions, that is like a workshop. So that would count. And if you have the instructor interaction that you can document, and I'd say document simply because you might get audited, that should count for your study group, Patricia. All right. Nadim is saying, you have the watermark exam subscription. What's the pass rate for, and then the question got cut off. I often get asked, what's the passing rate? For the real exam, we're guessing around 70%. That's pretty typical for certification exams. What we always advise on our exams is to strive to get 80% average across the board to sort of over prepare yourself. We would rather have you be more prepared than not. And so we like to err on the side of having more thoroughness. And some feedback we've gotten recently is that our questions are harder than the real exam. And actually we take pride in that, because if you find the real exam easy compared to what we prepare you for, I think I can't think of a better way to tell us thank you for helping you out, because I mean, that's what I would want. So I don't know, I hope that's true for most people, because that's our aim. And anyway, so Nadim, shoot for about 80% on our practice exams is what our advice is. John is saying, what courses count toward the 35-hour training requirement? John and everybody else, anything related to business analysis counts. So anything like BA fundamentals, or our BA boot camp, or our BA certification, or I'm sorry, our CBAP certification prep classes, but it could also be something, let's say, kind of related, like consulting skills for business analysts, or it could be stakeholder or influencing or conflict management skills, that kind of thing. As long as it relates to the field of business analysis, you're pretty safe. If you look at the BA body of knowledge, the Babic, and look, say, for topics and techniques and underlying competencies that are there, you could get into trouble with things like Six Sigma. And I've had people ask me about that before, so I've reached out to IIBA to ask them. And by the way, I would urge you to write to certification@iiba.org certification@iiba.org, with specific questions on courses, let's say like Six Sigma, to see if they qualify. A lot of people ask me about certified Scrum product owner courses, because you do that on the job perhaps, or you need that skill, but that doesn't count either. That's not a business analysis course. Again, if you're really in doubt, the arbiter of that is going to be IIBA, and I'm just giving you my advice. Alka says, my question is, do we need to take any online courses? No, you don't. Any courses, I assume, for your professional development you're asking about, whether it's in-person or virtual, online, count as long as they're interaction. Now, if you take a strictly e-learning course, that doesn't count, because unless you have some interaction with an instructor, that will not count. So like a pure video-based course will not count. So that's something to bear in mind. We've devised something called Anytime Learning. I don't know if you've seen that on our website, but you can ask questions of an instructor, which you certainly can do as part of our package. Even though it's a recorded version of a course, you can ask questions, and that gives you the difference there. Jeremy says, I went through the CBAP Certification Prep 3.0 course back in October. I assume that's ours, right, Jeremy? And haven't done anything since. What would be a good approach to get going back to complete the certification? Well, since it's October, you probably don't have access anymore to the recordings. We give that for a 3-month period, Jeremy. But you should have this certification prep guide and possibly even the online study exam, unless you activated your subscription. If you didn't activate the subscription, you should be able to use that. That's another good way to get back into it. But certainly the study guide and rereading the Babic would be great ways to get started. So check that out, Jeremy. Dinara asks, hi, what qualifies as PD hours for ECBA? Actually, let's look at this right here. Let me show this slide here. For all of the certifications, ECBA, CCBA, and CBAP, you don't need any for AAC, by the way, but 21 hours in the last 4 years. Again, business analysis kind of training, and with the same kind of considerations as I mentioned for the other question. So instructor interaction, as well as producing some kind of work, and in the field of business analysis. Self-directed training won't count because it doesn't fulfill those requirements. Okay, Nadim says, is it enough to do just the exams, or no, it's not enough to just do the exams, Nadim, and should be enough to pass the exam? What are you missing, he asks. Well, I think you have to understand the BA body of knowledge, first of all. We've constructed our study exam as a way to understand and dissect and absorb the information in the Babic enough to be able to pass. It doesn't mean you have to memorize it. Nobody would expect you to. And I often get asked, well, how many of the techniques do I need to memorize, and how much of the task, et cetera? And you don't need to. You really need to understand it. Now, there's a big difference. The questions are the ultimate way to test your knowledge of the Babic. So my first suggestion is to read the Babic pretty much in the entirety. You don't have to do it in one sitting or in one order. What we suggest is to study one knowledge area at a time and pick the knowledge area you feel you have the least knowledge of, because you want to devote most of your study time to that. Human nature typically means that you'll do most of your in-depth work at the front end and perhaps not as much on the back end. So start, let's say, with a topic like strategy analysis if you haven't had that much experience on the job. And then if you have our online study exams, and after you read a chapter in the Babic, and optionally if you purchased our study guide, read that, and then do practice questions and see how you do. It's a great way to get feedback about how much you've absorbed the information. You might want to use other methods like flashcards or study tables or study groups or Writing out your own questions, I really think that's a great way to help you prepare as well, particularly in areas you're having trouble with. Write out your own questions and come up with your own answers. Maybe you don't need to get into the distractors to the extent we do on our question, but still, writing your own questions is a great way to really absorb the Babic. John is saying, what is an efficient way to learn the Babic material by utilizing our study guide, study grid, flashcards, and test bank? I kind of sort of answered. Thank you, John. I just answered that, I think, by going through an area at a time and using the adjunct materials, taking the practice exams, and then, depending on if you're not scoring close enough to that 80% threshold, go back and use the materials. Maybe you want to reserve the study tables and study or the flashcards until after you take the practice exams. But each person's kind of unique. And a lot of times I advise people to use your own learning style to help you best. So that if you're a very detailed person and you love the specifics of information and categorizing, whatever, we call that blue energy style, where you learn by reading and kind of going in depth, then you may want to use all those things up front. If you're more of an action-oriented person and you like to make quick decisions, the idea of a lot of details kind of gives you kind of the shivers or pain or whatever. Maybe start with the exam questions. After reading the Babic, I always advise that, but go right into the exam questions, see how you do, and then go into the detailed areas as you need them. If you're more of an interaction kind of person, you like studying with other people, then a study group or a class is maybe a better way for you to handle that. So, but given that you asked about the self-study materials, John, I think the approach I outlined earlier might be the best. Folks, if you have any follow-up questions, please shoot them on in. I'm happy to answer them as well. Nadim says, if I have around 5 years of IT experience, but around 2 years of actual BA experience, what can I attempt? Can I attempt CBAP, or will my application be rejected? The key here, Nadine and everybody else, is the number of hours. Let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger for people to see. But the numbers of hours is 3,750. It's not the number of years for CCBA, and 7,500 of hours for CBAP. I doubt you'll have that many in 2 years. It's usually about 4 or 5 years to get to that level. So take a look at your BA experience. If you haven't already, I would download our CBAP application. Here we go. A CBAP application spreadsheet. We have that available. Here's the URL in your handouts to getting that. That application worksheet is great. It's helped a lot of people. We provide it free of charge to help you organize your project hours, as well as just the projects themselves to apply. So to kind of go off on that a little bit, what you're going to be asked to do in the IIBA application is to break down project by project, how many hours experience, or how many hours of BA work did you do, and in which knowledge areas. So our spreadsheet is oriented that way to help you kind of organize and then to tally up how many hours you have. So I would do that, and maybe not completely as detailed as the final one, but just to gauge for yourself how many hours. I'm guessing the CCBA would be a good choice for you, Nadim, just based on the 2 years that you said you had. Nadim says the question break, but here it is. Is it enough to just do the exams? It should be enough to pass the exam, right? No, what am I missing? I think I answered that question already. Sorry, I didn't delete that. So, okay. Denara, are the questions with multiple choice? Yes, all the questions on all the exams are multiple choice with A, B, C, D. And are there questions like all the above or none of the above? Thankfully, no. It's a straightforward exam methodology based on something called Bloom's taxonomy. If you want to research that, Bloom taxonomy, search Google for that if you're curious. It's all straightforward answers. In the past, IIBA has tried to be very tricky with too close answers. Feedback we're getting is that it's not so much anymore, but still a lot of our questions will have a couple of close answers to really test whether you know your stuff or not. So that doesn't mean the questions are easy. It's just, fortunately, none of the above, all the above are horrible ways to test, in my opinion. Thankfully, they don't have that. Basak is saying, I'm interested in CBAP and I'm studying the Babic guide. That's great. So do you think it's necessary to memorize guidelines, tools, and techniques section, which are at the end of every chapter? The quick answer is no, not memorizing. Basak saying, I'm very confused about them. I couldn't keep in mind. I agree. Now, what do you do about them? That is always the big question about how to deal with them. You're going to be asked questions that could come from one of the guidelines or the tools or the techniques. So you have to have some familiarity. Number one, reading about the Babic is one way. And I know not everybody's going to absorb them by reading. Again, but based on that learning style that I kind of outlined briefly before, you may not understand just by reading the Babic. So you need to use your other techniques, such as practice questions, just to kind of get a sampling of what might you be asked. One of the things that we've striven for in our online exam is to give you detailed Babic reference numbers for correct and incorrect answers. That way you can go research and read about why an answer is correct or incorrect to be able to help you out. That's not enough. I mean, I wouldn't rely on that completely because we're guessing what's important in the Babic for you to understand. The actual questions, of course, are based on what the question writers thought. So you might well get asked a question for one of the techniques or one of the guidelines you never studied. And bear in mind, you could get 30% wrong and still pass. I think the number one thing that makes people really understand and should pass the exam and not pass it is test anxiety. So let me repeat that. Test anxiety is a killer because that will really mess up your ability to perform come the exam time. You got a lot on the line. It costs money. You take time away from family and work to study and then to go to the exam. So you don't want to fail. So the pressure is on. And I felt that test anxiety for both my PMP and my CBAP. So what can you do to alleviate that? Well, get all that preparation you can. And as long as I'm talking about test anxiety, before you take your exam, get plenty of rest. Don't cram the night before the exam. Spread out your study time. You can take up to about 100 hours of study time to help you get it comfortable enough to pass the CBAP. Not everybody needs that amount of time, but that's the median number of hours on 2 different surveys we've done about how long it takes people to pass. So I want to try to alleviate your test anxiety, Basak, with that answer. Hopefully I did. Elior is saying, hi, Rich. In the real exam, the questions were more situational and case-based. However, the Watermark guide was not. How do you suggest I prefer the exam's case-based questions? Well, our online study exams have those in it. The Watermark guide is long enough as it is. We felt really torn by expanding it to as many pages as we did. The thought of adding additional pages about specific question types didn't make sense to us. So what we did instead was put those case-based questions into the study exam to let you practice them and have the real life experience with them as well. So if you ask, how do I prepare for those exams, our study exam is the way to do it. Bear in mind, our classes and our study guide are meant to help you absorb and understand the Babic. Nadim is repeating a question. I have around 5 years of IT experience, but around 2 years of actual BA experience. Okay, I think I answered that, but if I didn't, then shoot me back something else. All right, okay. Okay, I'm culling out some questions that I've already answered. Alex says, what's the pass rate for those that did not complete the videos or did not watch the videos at all? Don't know. I really am guessing at the pass rate to say it's over 80% as far as people who take the real exam, but IIBA does not release their pass rate if that's what you're asking. So Daniela says, please some advice about recertification without PDUs from professional experience, okay? If you're going to be on maternity leave, which you say you're going to be doing, well, you can do a lot of recertification using webinars, which you can do from home. You can do self-study training for recertification. You can do, which is what a webinar is. You can attend local chapter meetings if you're able to get away from the kids to go to a local chapter meeting. You're from Romania, right, Daniela? I assume you have some local chapter meetings, perhaps not in your hometown, but you can attend them virtually and get credit for PDUs. You could read books. What's cool about recertification CDUs is that it's pretty broad and much better, easier than the initial application. So reading books will count. My last time I certified, I put down a book that I had read in the field. So there are a variety of ways you can do that, and hopefully that gives you a start on some of the other things. Nadim is asking, can we share any mnemonics you guys use in the Babic? Well, we have a variety of them in our study guide. It's not on the top of my tongue. I don't have them handy right now. Doesn't mean I won't share them, but I just, my mind is a blank. I've got a lot of questions coming up, so I'm going to hold on that one, Nadim. Dinar is saying, is it written on the IIBA.org that you can count the self-directed learning as the PD hours? I'm a little bit confused. You can't use those self-directed hours as the initial PD hours. Let's be clear about that. The PD hours they talk about are the initial 21 or 35 hours you need to qualify for the certification. The others about the self-directed training I was just talking about are the recertification and the CDUs, continuing development units. So yeah, they should be documented. Look for, first of all, the initial PD hours are in the handbooks. So on the handouts you've got, there are some links for the different certifications. I'm kind of trying to highlight them right now. I don't know if you can see my little cursor moving around here, so I'll do the spotlight. So you see these things over here. The certification handbooks have information about the PD hours. Then the recertification handbook is something that, I don't think it's on this page here, but once you're on an IIBA site, you should be able to find recertifications. It's fine. That's where they'll talk about the different categories of hours you can use and activities that you can use. For sure, for sure. Basak says, what's the most effective subject in Babic in order to pass the CPAP exam? Okay, are you asking what area to concentrate on? I think what IIBA has done is told us through their blueprint, which I'm showing now on screen, and it is an even percentage across the different categories of exams. You look at the numbers here, and I don't want to dwell on any one of them, but it tells you that there is no one area. Now, if you take a look at, whoops, get back here. If you're looking at CBAP, let's say, let's see where level 2 and level 3. How do I get over there? Let me hide this. All right, there we go. Okay. So for CBAP and for, let me go. Okay. For CCBA, if that's what you're interested, requirements analysis and design definition have the most at 32 and 30% respectively, CCBA and CBAP. So you really need to understand those. So if you're looking at most effective, I would say that has to be, but you can't ignore the others. Yeah, I suppose you could, let's say, blow off one of them and not get any questions right and still expect to pass, but you're not going to get all of the questions in, we call it RAD, R-A-D-D. In the RAD section, you're not going to get them all right. So you would be best to study them all. But okay, if you're looking at kind of an 80-20, so again, to focus on CBAP, you've got the 80% here, but all the others are pretty even. So I don't know which one you pick next. What I, again, suggest you study after that would be the area that you feel the weakest in, because then you can bring up your score the easiest that way if you look at some areas that you're not quite so proficient in. Okay, Douglas is asking, which certification do you recommend for a long time, 30+ year IT professional, developer, analyst, director with only recently 1.5 years BA training experience? What I suggest, Douglas, and then everybody else, if you're in similar boats, is look at the CCBA. If you have about 1.5 years of BA training experience, you might qualify for that. Again, going back here to that certification, it adds up to 3,750 hours, which and you might not have in a year and a half. But if that's the case, then maybe, whoops, darn, then look at the ECBA, because there are no minimum hour requirements there, and that's a good place to get started. Then you can move to the CCBA once you've hit that threshold number that you need. Folks, it's the bottom of the hour. We only schedule this for half an hour, but I'm always happy to stay on. If you have to leave because of scheduling issues, know that you're going to get a copy of the recording and you can catch the last few minutes that you might have missed. If you can stay on with us, I'm going to keep going. So usually I can extend 5 or 10 or so minutes. So John is saying, just confirming, did you say an average of 100 hours of study to pass? That's what our research showed for CCBA and CBAP. It's been a few years since we did it. We should probably do another research study. However, yeah, it was pretty consistent. I was surprised. From our first study to the second, it was pretty identical in terms of what people reported, the number of hours they took to pass. Now that includes things like reading the Babic. If you go to a study group, you add those hours, that sort of counts towards that number, and maybe you take a class, 35 hours towards that 100. But yeah, that is what people say. And I've had people report even way more than that because they were either between assignments as consultants or that they just were really nervous and so that they wanted to over prepare. Again, a lot of your study or your learning styles has a lot to do with that. I've seen blogs where people said, oh, I only took 21 hours of study time to pass. Well, good for you. That is not something I would ever recommend to somebody to think that you can get by with that few. So Nadeem has left, but he asked another question. Any self-help books to be productive BA to get better in the BA's underlying competencies? He says 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is definitely one of them. I like that book. It's a great book. The topics in there are pretty wide and varied in the underlying competencies, so it's hard to pinpoint just one book that I would suggest. You can look at the different subject areas, whether it's stakeholders or communication skills and the like, and pick out some. I have a hard time just off the top of my head recommending any one specific book. Nia is asking, I'm from India. Hey, welcome. It must be very late there right now, so thanks for staying on the call. Your questions regarding the weightage of questions in CBAP, direct questions versus scenario-based. We understand the direct questions are maybe a quarter, 25%, let's say. And the rest are either case study or scenario. And that it's probably equally split between scenario and case study for the rest of the questions. So we've worked on our study exam to try to equal that, but I think we have more direct questions, in part because we want you to understand what's in the Babic. And partly, it's also difficult to write good case studies. You're going to have a small finite number in your exam of case studies, whereas we let you do unlimited numbers of simulations where we show our case studies. And by the way, that's where in our online study exam, you're going to find the case studies, is if you do the simulations. And so we've had to have a greater number of them for each batch of simulation questions or exams that you practice on. I don't know if, I'm not making much sense there, but it takes a lot to create a good case study. So we don't have as many as maybe we'd like. We keep adding them slowly here and there. So that's one way to make up for it. Juan is saying, again from Romania, welcome. Glad to see a couple of Romanians. There is an event in Romania for tomorrow. Cool. Requirements analysis and design as solution evaluation registration. Excellent. That's thanks for sharing that. Okay, excellent. Let's see, people have to bug out. That's cool for lunch or look for the recording. Bossack saying, is it enough to get a self-training course for achieving PD hours or the initial CBAP certification? As long as a self-training course has instructor interaction and work that you do. A lot of e-learning courses or video courses, you just simply watch and absorb, you take your notes. That will not count. But if you have access to an instructor, and if you're actually doing work as part of the online course, then it will count. Nia says, I'm taking an online exam from Watermark Learning. Hey, and I've yet to finalize my exam date. Okay. How much should I achieve in a simulation test to know that I'm ready? Again, I would average getting 80% plus or minus a couple across the board. I think you might, if you have a knowledge area or two that you're not up to that level, but overall you're pretty close to 80%, you're probably ready. Again, that's overly prepared for the real exam. We've had people say, I was getting nearly 100% on your questions and I still failed the real exam. Well, we don't ever advocate that. 100% means you're probably taking too many of our questions and memorizing them and getting a false sense of security, because our questions are meant to help you understand the BABAC. They're not meant to give you exact replicas of what's on the real exam. We don't do that. Any vendor that does is violating their code of conduct with the IIBA, and that's a problem. So what we want to do is set up questions based on our own experience of question writing and taking exams ourselves of what the real exam might be like in terms of taking sections out of the BABAC and testing you on them. So that's kind of a little bit more exploration of that, but okay. Next question, Douglas. How many study hours expected to pass the ECBA? That's a great question. It's not nearly 100 because you're only going to get 50 questions, and they're more, well, they're all knowledge based. So you would be able to, well, maybe 50 hours at the most, perhaps, to pass. I'm just throwing that out. We haven't done a study on that. And like I said, it's probably time that we do another study on that. So I'm going to throw that out as a guesstimate, okay? Just a qualified guesstimate of probably no more than 50 hours. And if you take a class like ours, 21 of those are, almost half of the time is devoted to class, and then you got it. Patricia says, if you had a CCBA or CBAP certification, is it quote unquote worth getting the Agile AAC? Definitely. I think the AAC gives you, if you're an Agile practitioner, another basis of demonstrating your knowledge. And if you want to become an Agile practitioner, then it shows your current or future employers that you are serious and that you're dedicated and you've taken it on to get that certification to be able to perform in an Agile environment. So either way, it's a benefit. Pesach says, how many questions include CBAP? 120 or 150? Okay, if you take a look at the little grid here, there we go. 50 questions for ECBA, 130 for CCBA, and 120 questions on the CBAP exam. In your handouts will tell you that. So the spreadsheet says 120. Interesting that the spreadsheet would list that, but anyway, the slide here shows the correct number. I'm curious where the 150 used to be the number for CBAP in version 2. Richard saying, not sure if this has been asked, but on the CPAP application, do we enter our experience per organization or per project? The experience is per project. And what you do is start with the most recent project first, go backwards, and try to group any small projects together into larger chunks. IIBA doesn't want to look at every 50-hour project per se, so if you can kind of logically group them, that's easier on you and them alike. So just go backwards until you hit the 3750 or 7500 or whatever the case is, and probably add a few more just for measure in case IIBA decides something is invalid and decides to lop off some hours. So per project, and it could, you could have multiple organizations, of course, in that time as you go backwards. So hopefully that answers your question, Richard. And I don't see any other questions in the queue right now. So it's kind of the last call, so to speak, for questions before we end it this month. Again, I want to invite you to come back next month if you're still studying and applying, or wherever your status is on the CBAP, and we'll have another session. Hopefully this gives you a chance to kind of, extend your own knowledge and come up with your own plan. Michael says, how do I go back and edit work experience input? Are you talking about on your application, Michael? Then he says yes. So I would contact IIBA, because unless you can go in, what I would try first, if it was me, I'd try to go back, bring up my application, see if I could go back in and edit it. And if you can't, then contact IIBA. That's the only way you can actually do it, I think. But I would try first, because maybe they'll let you edit it. I haven't gone in, because I'm already a CBAP holder. They won't let me go in and fiddle with the application to see how things work. So my knowledge is dated as far as their interface goes, and maybe they've made it, user-friendly enough to be able to let you do that. I would hope they would. Okay, so hopefully that answers the question. Last call, so to speak, and again, feel free to contact us for more. Michael says, also must say, still attend a course for the CBAP if I'm a PMP, ACB, and LSSBP certified. You don't have to attend a course for the CBAP, but you have to have BA training. So maybe I'm contradicting myself. The idea here is that you need to get the BA training to qualify for it. So does that make sense? And then you need the 35 hours, even if you are qualified with other certifications. Nia is saying, I'm told there are no questions from the perspectives. That is true. No questions from perspectives. The basic knowledge areas, plus the intro and core concepts, and some underlying competencies will be there. Michael Martin says, does my job training count? Well, if you can produce a certificate of completion for a formal course, it can't be informal, kind of on the job training, but as long as there's a formal course with an instructor and work that you did, such as workshops and exercises and so on, then it counts. So I have to dash. Thank you for all your questions. I really appreciate your interest, and hopefully that, thank you, Neha. I'm glad the insights help, and look for a follow-up from us. And I do always wish you the best on getting your certification and fulfilling your dreams. So thank you very much, folks. And I'm going to stop the recording right now.